You've probably heard the saying, when we know better, we do better, that's often attributed to Maya Angelou. And I think the saying is true, but sometimes it's eventually true. If you've ever felt like, man, I know better, but why am I still struggling with this? Then this episode's for you. Stick around for this next episode of The Nourished Life for Christian Women. Hello, friends. I'm glad you're here with me today for another episode of The Nourished Life for Christian Women. Today, I want to start with a moment that maybe you've experienced before. Maybe you're standing in the kitchen late at night looking for a snack. Or maybe you're getting dressed in the morning and you catch a glimpse of yourself in the mirror and immediately start with a critique. And a thought crosses your mind. I know better than this. Maybe it's about eating, maybe it's about how you're speaking to yourself, maybe it's about stress or rest or the way you keep pushing yourself. And the thought comes quietly but firmly, I know better, so why am I still struggling? If you've ever stood in your kitchen, looked in the mirror, or promised yourself you'd start fresh on Monday and wondered that exact thing, you are most certainly not alone. There's a phrase that people often quote when they talk about growth: when we know better, we do better. It's a beautiful idea, and I think it's true sometimes, eventually, it's true. It suggests that learning leads to wisdom and wisdom leads to change. But if we're being honest about real life, that's not always how it unfolds. Sometimes we really do know better, but we still find ourselves stuck in the same patterns. You may know that dieting doesn't actually lead to lasting peace with food. You may know that criticizing your body doesn't create motivation, it just creates more stress. You may know that rest matters, that comparison steals joy, that grace matters more than perfection. And if you're a woman of faith, you may even know deep in your heart that your worth as a daughter of God was never meant to be measured by a number on a scale, a reflection in the mirror, or how productive you are. And yet, you still find yourself starting over again on Monday and hearing that critical voice in your head and still wondering why something that seems so clear in your mind feels so hard to live. When that happens, a quiet conclusion can begin forming in the background. You may never say it out loud, but it sounds something like this: if I know better and I'm still struggling, then maybe I'm the problem. Maybe I don't have enough discipline. Maybe I'm not trying hard enough. Maybe I should know better by now and be further along. That's a heavy place to live from and quite the burden to carry. Because suddenly the struggle stops being something that you're working through and starts feeling like something's wrong with you. I remember a season in my own life where this question showed up for me again and again. I had read the books, understood the principles, I could explain exactly what the answers were, and yet there were moments where I still felt like I was starting all over again and again. And I remember thinking, why is this still so hard when I know so much? Over the years of working with women and walking through my own journey, I began noticing something important. Many of the women I work with are incredibly wise. They know a lot. They've studied the thing, they've listened to the podcast, they've read the books. Some of them could probably teach the class. And many of them, most of them, have even prayed about it. And yet they still feel stuck, which tells us something very important. Usually, the issue isn't a lack of knowledge. Most women today have access to more information than any generation before them. And in a minute, I want to share something that took me years to understand, something that changed how I see struggle completely. Because once you see this one piece clearly, a lot of the frustration women carry around food, body image, discipline, even faith suddenly begin to make sense. So stay with me because this may help you see your experience in a completely different way. But information alone doesn't create peace, and it doesn't automatically create change. I know you've experienced this for yourself. You know what I'm talking about. Because knowing something in your head and feeling safe enough, supported enough, and self trusting enough to live from that knowing, two very different things. For example, You might know that nourishing your body consistently helps you feel better. But if your history with food has involved restriction, starting over, trying to get it right, your body may not fully trust that nourishment is safe and steady. Or you might know that speaking kindly to yourself is healthier than harsh criticism. But if you spent decades hearing that inner voice telling you you're not doing enough, you're not disciplined enough, you're not measuring up somehow, that voice probably feels very familiar. And the familiar can feel safer than change, even when it's uncomfortable. So when we say, I know better, so why can't I do better? What we may actually be experiencing is something deeper, not a lack of intelligence, not a lack of discipline, but a loss of self trust. Somewhere along the way, many women stop trusting the part of themselves that actually knows. I know this was my experience. Before I started this work, if you would have asked me if I trusted myself, I would have said, yeah, I do. I'm a confident person. I have confidence in my decisions that I make and my thought processes that get me there. But once I started doing this, I was shocked to find out how many areas I really did not trust myself. I was not going, gathering information and going with my inner knowing. I was looking outside for all the answers. The part of you that knows when you're hungry wasn't listening to that. Part of you that knows when you're tired couldn't do that. Couldn't rest when I needed to because, taking a nap in the middle of the day, that's not what productive people do. The part that senses when something doesn't feel aligned with who you truly are. Sometimes that wisdom, the wisdom God placed within you, gets buried under years of pressure and comparison and trying to prove yourself. When that happens, we often start looking outside ourselves for answers, like I did. More rules, more plans, more systems, more ways to finally get it right. But there's something I've come to see over and over again. No amount of effort can resolve a belief about identity. We can try and try, but if our identity, what we believe about ourselves, is standing in our way, that effort is not going to make the difference. If deep down we believe we're not quite enough yet, every new plan will quietly feel like another attempt to fix ourselves. And that's exhausting because the goalpost keeps moving. Peace keeps like feeling just one improvement away. This is one of the reasons I talk so often about something I called staying with yourself, learning to stay present with your own experience instead of constantly correcting it, staying with your body, your wisdom, your emotions, your faith, instead of assuming that those things need to be overridden or fixed or edited somehow. That doesn't mean ignoring growth or change. Knowing that we're enough where we are doesn't mean that we're going to stay where we are. It just means that we're okay. We're in process. It simply means beginning from a different place. I often talk about wearing our judges' robes or wearing our scientist lab coat and taking off those judges' robes and the judgments that we're putting on ourselves and on others and putting on our lab coat and being willing to learn and experiment and just explore. That applies here. Instead of sitting in your judge's robe and asking, what is wrong with me that I need to fix? You can put on your lab coat instead and explore by asking, what might my body and my life be trying to show me? It's a much gentler and more effective place to start. And interestingly, when we begin rebuilding that sense of inner trust, something surprising happens. The things we knew better about and were struggling with start becoming easier to live. Eating becomes calmer, movement becomes more joyful, choices begin coming from alignment instead of from pressure. Not because we finally found the perfect plan, but because we stopped abandoning ourselves in the process. If you've ever wondered why change has felt difficult, even though you know so much, I want you to hear this clearly. There's a very good chance that the issue was never that you lacked wisdom and it was never that you lacked discipline. You probably have evidence of lots of areas of your life where you have had plenty of discipline to be able to get the job done. What may be happening is simply that a part of you that already knows has been patiently waiting for you to come back to it. Most women I work with don't need more information. They need freedom from the quiet belief that they themselves are somehow not enough. In the coming weeks, I'm going to talk more about one particular belief that I see underneath so many struggles that women carry. It's subtle, it often hides inside self improvement and self discipline. But once you begin to see it clearly, a lot of things in your life suddenly start making sense. Sometimes the wisest thing a woman can do is stop trying to fix herself long enough to listen to herself. I want to come back to that moment we talked about at the beginning. The moment when you're standing in the kitchen late at night or looking in the mirror getting ready for the day, and the thought appears, I know better than this. For many women, that moment feels like proof that something is wrong with them. But what if it's actually something else? What if that moment is simply the place where your wisdom and your struggle are meeting at the same time? And sometimes the real work isn't learning more. Take it from somebody who loves to learn. Sometimes it's gently untangling the belief that somewhere along the way you begin carrying the belief that you yourself are not quite enough. For today, I want to leave you with a simple reflection. If there's an area of your life where you've been sitting in your judge's robes and saying, I know better, so why can't I do better? Maybe take off that robe and try asking a different question. Put on your scientist's lab coat, and instead of asking, what's wrong with me? Hear the judgment? Instead, ask, what part of me might be asking to be understood instead of corrected? That question alone can begin opening the door to a much more peaceful way of living in your body and in your life. Thanks for spending time with me today. And until next time, give yourself grace and stay with yourself. If today's episode or any other has resonated with you, I wanted you to know that I offer a free 30-minute call. If you'd like to schedule that, you can find the details for how to do that in the description for this episode. And in the meantime, don't forget to like and subscribe.